The stars above burned cold and distant, like silent witnesses to the end of a proud race. The human worlds were gone. Cities turned to ash, oceans boiled, skies filled with the smoke of defeat. Every defense fleet had fallen, every colony silenced. And now only Fort Vega remained. It hung in orbit around a dying red star, a small metal fortress battered by years of war. The station's walls were scorched, its shields weak, and its crew tired beyond measure. Once thousands had lived and worked there. Now fewer than 300 remained. They had seen too much. Too many battles, too many funerals, too many flags folded and stored away. Outside, the Craven Empire's fleet filled the darkness like a sea of fire. Hundreds of their warships drifted in formation, their engines glowing blue and cold. They were celebrating. Their victory songs echoed through the void, carried on open frequencies. The alien cheers rolled like thunder, mocking the last survivors of Earth. Inside the control room, the lights flickered. Smoke curled from broken panels and the air smelled of oil and metal. Commander Elias Rourke stood at the central table, staring at the holographic image of the enemy fleet. His uniform was torn at the sleeve, his face lined with exhaustion. He had not slept for days. Around him, his officers worked in silence. Lieutenant Mara Venn, the station's communication officer, tried to repair the damaged console. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the signal controls. Every few seconds, a sharp buzz of alien speech broke through the static. "They're still broadcasting," she said softly. "They're laughing at us." Rourke didn't answer at first. He looked at the tactical display again. The enemy fleet had surrounded them completely. Escape was impossible. Reinforcements were none. The other human outposts were gone, destroyed months ago. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Let them laugh. That's all they know." Mara looked up at him. "Sir, they want us to surrender." He gave a short, bitter smile. "They already think we have." The Craven commander, Overlord Vrax, appeared on the main screen. He was tall, covered in scaled armor with 4 gleaming eyes that shimmered like cold glass. His voice was deep and sharp, echoing across the bridge. "Humans of Fort Vega," he said, "your species is finished. Your cities are dust. Your ships are wrecks. Your sun itself is dying. You have no army left, no hope left. Surrender now and we will give you peace." The bridge fell silent. Every human stared at the screen, waiting for their commander's answer. Rourke did not move. He studied the alien's face, calm and unshaken. Then he asked quietly, "Peace or silence?" The alien tilted his head. "Both." The connection ended. The laughter of the Craven soldiers returned, louder now. Their ships flashed their lights in celebration, as if mocking the humans before firing the final shot. Rourke turned to his crew.
"Get me a channel," he said. Mara hesitated.
"To whom, sir?" "To them." The officers exchanged uncertain looks. Some thought he had finally lost hope, but Rourke's eyes were clear. Mara slowly activated the channel. The main screen flickered back to life, showing the Craven fleet again, rows upon rows of ships gleaming in the dark. Rourke stood tall, even as sparks fell from the ceiling above. His armor was cracked, his boots covered in dust, but he looked unbreakable. "This is Commander Elias Rourke of the Human Defense Fleet," he said. "You think humanity is finished? You think we're just ghosts waiting to vanish. But you're wrong." He paused, looking down for a moment at the torn human flag lying near the console. It had fallen during the last explosion. He bent down, picked it up, and brushed off the soot. The colors were faded, but still visible. Blue, white, and green, symbolizing Earth and the colonies that once were. Rourke straightened his back, holding the flag tightly. "You may have taken our worlds. You may have destroyed our ships. But you will never take this." He pointed to the flag. "This stands for the fire that doesn't die, for the heart that keeps beating even in the dark." He took a single step forward toward the screen. The camera caught that moment. The damaged armor, the rising smoke, the steady look in his eyes. Every Craven watching saw it, and for the first time the enemy's laughter began to fade. Down in the lower decks, the soldiers of Fort Vega watched the broadcast. Mechanics stopped their work. Medics froze mid-treatment. Pilots paused inside their ships. They saw their commander standing firm, facing an empire alone, and something began to stir inside them, something they thought had died long ago. Hope. Private Jalen, a young engineer, whispered to his friend, "He's still standing." His friend nodded slowly. "Then so will we." Across the fortress, the quiet turned into movement. Engineers returned to their stations. Pilots prepared their fighters, checking power cells and weapons. The few drones that still worked were launched to form a small defense ring. Fort Vega was alive again, if only for a final stand. Rourke didn't know it, but his simple step had become a spark spreading through every corridor. Humanity, broken but breathing, began to rise again. Later, when he walked through the corridors, he saw faces change. The fear was still there, but so was pride. Men and women saluted him, not out of duty, but out of respect. He nodded to each of them. He had no great speech left to give. He didn't need one. His actions had spoken for him. Mara caught up with him near the armory. "Sir," she said softly, "the crew's ready. If this is the end, they want to meet it with you." He looked at her for a long moment.
"It's not the end," he said.
"It's the reminder." "The reminder?" she asked. "That even when the stars forget our names, the universe will remember we didn't bow." Hours passed. The Cravon fleet prepared for its final assault. Massive cannons glowed red as they charged. Alarms echoed across the station. But inside Fort Vega, the humans stood at their posts, calm, silent, waiting. Rourke walked to the main viewing deck. Through the glass he saw the endless darkness filled with enemy lights. Each one represented a ship larger and stronger than his own. Yet as he watched them, he felt no fear, only a strange peace. He remembered the early days of the war, his home on Earth, the laughter of his crew, the sunlight over the blue oceans. All gone now, but not forgotten, he whispered almost to himself. We were never the strongest, but we were always the ones who stood back up. The first enemy cannon fired. A beam of light tore through space, striking the shield. The fortress trembled, alarms blaring. But no one ran. No one screamed. Rourke gripped the flagpole and planted it beside the console. The fabric fluttered gently in the artificial breeze. "Hold the line," he said. And in that moment, the last fortress of humanity stood against an empire, not out of power, but out of pride. The Cravon cheered again, believing victory was near. Yet somewhere deep in their hearts, hidden behind armor and commands, a quiet unease began to grow. They had seen something impossible, a single human step forward in the face of extinction. And though they didn't yet understand why, they had stopped laughing. The silence after the first attack was heavier than the sound of explosions. Fort Vega had survived the opening barrage, but barely. The shields were thin, the hull cracked, and the power cells nearly drained. Yet inside the fortress, no one moved away from their post. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the main bridge, staring at the faint blue glow of the shield display. Every few seconds, the light flickered, showing that another section was failing. His face was calm, but behind his eyes was a storm of thought. Lieutenant Mara Venn spoke softly. "Shield power at 15%, sir. One more hit like that and we'll lose outer defense completely." Rourke nodded. "Then we'll make sure the next one counts for something." A quiet chuckle came from Lieutenant Grayson, the tactical officer. "You always sound like you have a plan, Commander. You actually do, or are you just trying to keep us calm?" Rourke gave a faint smile. "Both." A few of the crew laughed under their breath. Even in the face of death, that small sound brought warmth to the bridge. Outside, the Cravon fleet continued to circle like predators. They were preparing another strike, confident that the fortress would crumble soon. Their main screen flickered alive again. A broadcast from Overlord Vrax, the Cravon commander. His cold, scaled face filled the display. His voice was sharp, echoing through the speakers. "Human commander," he said, "your resistance is meaningless. You are surrounded by power beyond measure. Why do you still stand?" Rourke stared back, his hands folded behind his back. "Because standing is all we have left. And that's enough." Vrax tilted his head. "You speak of courage, but courage will not save you." "Maybe not," Rourke said quietly. "But it will remind you who we are." For a moment, neither side spoke. The alien commander studied Rourke as if he couldn't understand what kind of being would still speak with strength when his world had already ended. Finally, Vrax gave a low laugh. "Then show us, human. Show us this courage you are so proud of." The transmission ended. The bridge lights dimmed as another power fluctuation hit. The crew worked fast, switching systems to manual mode. The fortress was dying piece by piece, but still breathing, still alive. Down in the hangar, engineers fixed damaged fighters with whatever parts remained. Sparks flew as welding torches lit the shadows. Mechanics spoke in quick, hushed voices. No one mentioned the word defeat. Private Jalen, the young engineer, looked up at the damaged ceiling. "Do you think Command knows we're still here?" he asked. His supervisor, an old mechanic named Harlan, smiled weakly. "Doesn't matter. The commander's still here. That's enough for me." They both looked toward the viewing bay, where Rourke's voice played on every speaker. Not a speech, not an order, but simple, steady instructions. "Hold your stations. Keep your focus. Every second we stand is a second they learn we will not bow." Those words spread through every corner of Fort Vega, through the mess halls, the sleeping quarters, the infirmary, and the hangar. The fortress felt alive again, as if the air itself remembered what it meant to fight. Back on the bridge, Mara turned toward Rourke. "Sir, we've intercepted their internal signal. The Cravon soldiers, they're actually cheering. They think this next wave will finish us." Rourke looked at the main screen. The Cravon ships glowed brighter as they charged their weapons. "Good," he said. "Let them cheer." Mara frowned. "Sir?" He took a deep breath. "Because when they see what comes next, that sound will stop." The commander walked to the center of the bridge and pressed the communication button. "This is Commander Rourke, to all hands." Every light flickered. Every screen across the fortress lit up with his face. Men and women froze in place, their hearts beating faster. "I know what they're saying out there," Rourke began. "They think this is our end. They think we'll finally kneel. But they don't understand what kind of people we are." He paused and looked down at the floor. At the flag he had picked up earlier. Its edges were torn, but he held it firmly. "When Earth fell, we stood. When Mars burned, we stood. When the colonies went silent, we stood. And when they come for us, we will still stand. Because that's what it means to be human." He raised the flag slowly, his voice calm and steady. "They cheer because they think we've broken. Let's remind them what it looks like when we take one step forward." The fortress filled with quiet determination. Minutes later, the Cravon fleet began their second assault. Energy beams shot through space, lighting the dark void in streaks of blue and red. The shields flared bright, then failed completely. The outer walls shook as fire erupted through the corridors. Still, the humans held. Turrets fired from the fortress, hitting several Cravon ships. The explosions painted the stars with orange fire. Each hit was met with cheers from the human crew. Even as their fortress cracked, their spirits rose higher. "Direct hit on their lead cruiser," shouted Grayson. "Another one down," yelled a gunner from below. Rourke stood firm, watching the battle unfold. "Keep firing. Don't stop until they do." Mara looked at him. "Sir, we can't win this battle." He turned to her. "No, but we can make sure they never forget it." The Cravon commander watched from his flagship, disbelief growing in his eyes. These humans were supposed to surrender, not fight harder. They were supposed to fade quietly, not rise like fire from ashes. Brax turned to his officers. "Why do they keep fighting? What drives them?" One of the Cravon soldiers, younger and uncertain, answered softly. "Maybe it's what they believe, sir. Maybe they fight because they have nothing left but themselves." Brax's expression darkened. "Then we will take that from them too." He gave the order for the final assault. Inside Fort Vega, the last line of defense was ready. The power was low, the air hot, and the metal floors trembled with every impact. Smoke covered the corridors. Rourke stood near the main window, watching the enemy ships closing in. He could see their weapons glowing, ready to strike. He whispered under his breath, "So this is how it ends." Then he took one slow step forward. That movement, small, quiet, simple, changed everything. The crew saw him do it. Mara saw it. The soldiers in the hangar saw it on the cameras. Even the enemy watching from their screens saw that one man step forward against the impossible. And in that second, the fortress grew silent again. Rourke raised his voice. "You wanted the end of humanity?" he said, his tone steady and cold. "Then face it. We don't end easy." Across the battlefield, the Cravon soldiers stopped cheering. The sound faded as if swallowed by the stars. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even Overlord Vrax froze, staring at the screen showing one human standing alone. Something in that image broke the rhythm of their victory. The Cravon were a race built on power and fear, but they had never faced defiance like this. Not anger, not pride, just quiet, unshaken courage. Rourke looked at the stars outside the window and whispered, This is for every voice they tried to silence. Then he gave the order. All guns, fire. Every cannon on Fort Vega roared at once. The old metal walls trembled. The lights flared and the enemy's front line exploded in a storm of fire. The shockwave tore through the Cravon formation, breaking their perfect order. Cheers erupted inside the fortress. Even Mara shouted, her face lit with fire and hope. They're pulling back! Grayson grinned. We did it. They're retreating. Rourke shook his head slowly. Not yet, but now, they know who we are. In the darkness beyond, the Cravon regrouped. Frack stood on his command deck, silent. The image of that human, that single step, burned in his mind. He turned away from the window. Prepare the fleet, he said coldly. This is not over. But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his heart. He had conquered 100 worlds, yet he had never felt this strange unease before. He didn't understand why one step could silence an army. He didn't understand humanity. Not yet. Inside Fort Vega, the fires were being put out. The crew worked quickly, repairing what they could. The air smelled of smoke and metal, but the spirit inside the fortress had changed. Mara walked to Rourke's side. Sir, she said, you really think we can make it through? Rourke looked out at the stars. Maybe, maybe not. But now even if we fall, they'll remember us. She smiled softly. Because you took one step forward? He nodded. Because we all did. That night, if the word night still meant anything in the endless dark, the humans of Fort Vega rested for the first time in days. Some slept, some wrote messages home they would never send, and some simply sat by the windows looking at the distant stars. And somewhere in those stars, the Cravon fleet waited, silent now, no longer cheering. The war was far from over. But something had changed. For the first time since the fall of Earth, hope had returned. The fires of battle still glowed in the distance, drifting slowly through space like fading embers. Fort Vega had survived another day. Its walls were damaged, its engines weak, but the fortress still stood. That alone was a miracle. Commander Elias Rourke walked through the silent corridors. The lights flickered and the air smelled of burned metal. Every few steps he passed wounded soldiers, engineers, and medics who saluted him with tired but proud eyes. He returned each salute quietly, his face calm though his heart carried the weight of hundreds. When he entered the command bridge, Lieutenant Mara Venn looked up from her console. Her uniform was stained with dust, but her expression held a strange brightness. Good morning, sir, she said. Rourke glanced at the cracked display screen. Morning? He repeated with a faint smile. Feels like the same night that hasn't ended yet. She smiled back. Maybe it's a new one starting. Her words hung in the air for a moment. Maybe she was right. Across the fortress, people were rebuilding. Broken doors were repaired. Burned-out panels replaced. Even the kitchen staff were back to work, handing out hot meals and the first in days. The atmosphere felt lighter, different. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew what had changed. They had seen their commander take that one step forward against an empire. It had stirred something inside them. Something that had been buried under fear and exhaustion. Hope. That single human act had traveled far beyond Fort Vega. Unknown to the crew, the broadcast of Rourke's defiance had been picked up by old communication satellites scattered across human space. Some of them still worked, and they began transmitting his message outward. And across the void, in places long thought dead, someone was listening, the hidden outposts in a forgotten mining base on an asteroid belt. A small group of humans lived in silence. They had escaped when their colony was destroyed and had hidden for years. They thought no one was left. Then one night, their radio crackled to life. A weak voice full of static came through. Fort Vega, still standing. Commander Rourke took a step forward. The miners froze. The youngest among them whispered, "They're alive." Their leader, an old captain named Dara Holt, stood slowly. "If Vega still fights," she said, "then so do we." She ordered their ship engines reactivated for the first time in years. Dust fell from the ceilings as the old systems roared awake. One by one, lights came on across the asteroid base. Humanity was stirring again. The distant colonies farther away on the frozen moon of Kestrel 9, a group of scientists monitored deep space transmissions. They had given up on the war long ago and lived only to survive. When they caught the same signal, the image of Rourke standing before the enemy, they could hardly believe their eyes. Dr. Anna Terrace, the head scientist, replayed the footage again and again. He faced them alone, she whispered. Just one step and they stopped cheering. Her assistant, a young man named Theo, turned to her. What do we do? Anna took a deep breath. We send a message back. Tell them they're not alone. For the first time in years, the moon's communication array powered up. A thin beam of light shot into the dark, a signal carrying 5 simple words. Vega, we hear you. Standing. Back at Fort Vega, Mara ran to the commander's side. Sir, you'll want to see this. Rourke turned toward her screen. Dozens of small signals blinked on the map. Faint, far apart, but real. Are those human? Yes, sir, she said, excitement in her voice. Old colonies, mining stations, science bases, all sending messages. They're answering us. The room fell quiet for a heartbeat. Then Grayson laughed in disbelief. You mean we're not the last ones? Rourke's lips curved into a slow smile. No, Lieutenant. We never were. The bridge filled with quiet cheers and clapping. Some even wiped away tears. The fortress, once filled with silence, now echoed with laughter and renewed energy. Rourke looked at the stars outside. They thought they could end us by breaking our bodies, he said softly. But they forgot. Hope doesn't burn. Among the Cravon fleet, meanwhile, the Cravon Empire faced a different kind of battle, one inside their own ranks. Overlord Vrak stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at a replay of the human broadcast. The image of Rourke stepping forward had been studied again and again. His officers stood in silence. Finally, one of them, a young Cravon soldier, spoke. Commander, their fortress should have fallen. Why does it still stand? Vrax turned his 4 cold eyes toward him. Because they are not like us, the officer frowned. They are weaker. Vrax looked back at the screen. Then why do I feel fear when I watch that man stand? No one answered. He turned sharply to his aides. Send a message to the fleet. No cheering. No celebrating until Vega is gone. The Cravon soldiers obeyed, but deep inside doubt had started to grow. The spark spreads over the next few days. Human signals increased. Fort Vega became a symbol, a lighthouse in the darkness. More survivors revealed themselves, small ships and hidden bases coming online. Rourke's communication officer, Mara, spent every hour linking them together. Sir, she said one morning, we have 32 stations connected now. They're asking for orders. Orders? Rourke said with a quiet laugh. Tell them we don't give orders. Tell them to stand. And they did. Across space, humans began repairing old warships, scavenging parts from wrecks, rebuilding what little they had. Messages of courage passed between them. For Earth. For Vega. For the steppe. The phrase, the steppe, became a symbol among them, meaning the moment when fear ended. A visit to the medical bay later that evening. Rourke walked to the medical bay. The wounded lay on stretchers, their faces pale but proud. One young soldier tried to sit up when she saw him. Sir, she said weakly, did we really win? Rourke smiled gently. Not yet. But we reminded them who we are. That's the first victory. She nodded, her eyes shining. Then, I'd fight again if I could. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You already did. As he turned to leave, he heard soft laughter behind him. Not mocking laughter like the Cravons, but warm and alive. It filled the hallway like music. A message from the stars one night as Rourke stood alone at the viewing deck. Mara entered the room. Sir, she said, we received a long-range transmission. He turned. From where? Unknown, she said. But it's human. She played the message. Static filled the room, then a woman's voice came through, clear and strong. To Fort Vega. This is Captain Dara Holt of the asteroid fleet. We heard your stand. We are coming. Rourke stared at the screen in silence, then smiled slowly. Tell her. She's welcome home. A new beginning days passed. The Cravon fleet remained in orbit, watching but not attacking. They were waiting, perhaps studying, perhaps hesitating. Inside Fort Vega, life returned. The hydroponic gardens were repaired. The wounded healed. Training drills began again. The fortress no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a heartbeat. Mara stood beside Rourke at the command deck. Sir, they say other ships are moving toward us. Small fleets, maybe survivors from Mars and Titan. Rourke nodded. Good. We'll stand together this time. She looked at him with quiet pride. You started this, sir. One step, he shook his head. No, Lieutenant. Humanity did. I just reminded them how. They both looked out at the stars, no longer as enemies, but as possibilities again. Across the galaxy, the Cravon soldiers, now ordered to remain silent, began whispering among themselves. They had seen the humans rise again. Many could not understand it, but a few felt a strange respect. One Cravon pilot, staring at his own reflection in the glass, said softly, "If we fought for something like they do, maybe we would never lose." His partner frowned. "Be careful with your words." "I'm not afraid," the pilot replied. "They aren't." The light of Vega, when the next dawn came, if one could call it dawn in space, the dying red star flared slightly brighter. Its light reflected off the damaged metal of Fort Vega, painting it gold. The humans stood at the observation windows, watching the star rise again. It was a small thing, but it felt like the universe itself had decided to witness their return. Rourke looked out at that light and said softly, "Maybe this star isn't dying after all." Mara smiled. Maybe it just needed to see us stand first. The crew around them nodded, their hearts filled with quiet pride. Across the stars, other humans saw that same light through their sensors and felt the same warmth. That day was remembered for centuries as the awakening of hope, the day humanity, once scattered and broken, began to rise again. All because one man, when the enemy cheered, took a single step forward. The calm that had returned to Fort Vega after the awakening of hope did not last long. The Cravon fleet, though hesitant, had begun regrouping in the shadow of distant stars. Their glowing weapons glared like sharp blades ready to strike, and now they were coming for the fortress again, this time with renewed force. Inside the station, the humans worked with a sense of urgency that bordered on desperate joy. Engineers repaired damaged turrets and power nodes. Medics prepared triage stations for incoming injuries. Pilots ran diagnostics on fighter crafts, their hands steady even when their hearts raced. For the first time in years, the fortress felt alive with purpose. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the main bridge, studying the fleet through the observation windows. The Cravon ships moved with precision, but there was something different in their formation. Hesitation, a ripple of doubt. They remembered the step. They remembered human courage. Rourke's voice cut through the bridge calmly. "All stations prepare for full engagement. Today we remind them why humans never surrender." The crew responded with quiet determination. Every eye was focused, every finger steady on a control. The fortress, battered and scarred, became a single living organism, ready to strike as one. The first clash. The Cravon launched their first wave. Hundreds of energy beams cut through space like deadly threads, striking Fort Vega with precision. The station shuddered under each hit, alarms blaring and lights flickering. Some walls buckled and smoke filled the corridors. Yet the humans did not flinch. Turrets fired in synchronized volleys. Old defense drones patched together with wires and scraps whirred to life and launched into the void. Even damaged fighter crafts were pushed into the fight, piloted by soldiers who refused to stay behind. Lieutenant Grayson shouted from the tactical console, "Target the lead cruiser! Hit it before it reaches the outer shield." Rourke leaned over the table, studying the movement of the enemy fleet. Steady, use their confidence against them. Let them overextend. The human strategy was simple but brilliant. They relied on unpredictability, on daring maneuvers, and on the fact that the Cravon did not understand human instinct. They couldn't anticipate the courage that drove every decision. A Cravon cruiser exploded in a bright burst of orange light. The entire bridge erupted in cheers loud enough to drown out the alarms. Humans who had been silent for years smiled at one another, but Rourke's face remained calm. "Good," he said softly. "But this is only the beginning." The boarding operation. The battle raged outside. Rourke gathered a small boarding team. Their target, the enemy flagship. It was the heart of the Cravon command, and taking it could turn the tide. "Listen up," he said to the 5 soldiers at his side. "This mission is dangerous. We may not come back, but if we do, we give every human a chance to stand another day. Stick together, trust each other, and remember, fear is the enemy, not them." The team nodded. Each member understood the stakes. They had seen death, loss, and despair, yet their hearts burned with courage. Rourke led the team into a small shuttle. The vessel shuddered as it departed the station, weaving through energy blasts and debris. Outside, the battle painted the stars with fire. Explosions illuminated the void, reflecting in the glass of the shuttle. "Beautiful, isn't it?" whispered Private Jalen, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "Focus," Rourke said with a faint smile. "Beauty is for later. Survival is for now." Inside the enemy ship, the shuttle docked with the Cravon flagship. The boarding team moved silently through the corridors, the low hum of alien engines filling the space. The walls were cold and metallic, polished to a reflective sheen. They encountered resistance almost immediately, a few Cravon guards patrolling the halls. But the humans were faster, using agility, teamwork, and clever tactics to bypass or neutralize them. They did not fight recklessly. Every movement was calculated, every strike precise. Rourke led them toward the main command deck. With each step, he reminded them quietly, "Stay steady. Fear makes mistakes. Courage makes history." The corridors were long and winding. Security doors hissed open and closed. Alien sensors scanned the hallways. But the humans advanced, a small shadow moving with unwavering determination. The turning point. Meanwhile, back at Fort Vega, the main battle outside raged on. The Cravon, frustrated by the unexpected resilience of the fortress, began sending more ships forward. Yet each attack met fierce resistance. The human crews had learned to anticipate their enemy, to adapt, to survive. Rourke and his team finally reached the command deck. The doors loomed before them, reinforced and imposing. He glanced at his team. "Remember why we're here," he said. "One step at a time. That's all it takes." They breached the doors. The deck was massive, filled with control panels, glowing screens, and the unmistakable presence of Overlord Vrax. The Cravon commander turned sharply, his four eyes narrowing. "Humans," Vrax hissed. "You dare enter my ship?" Rourke stepped forward. His team fanned out, ready but calm. "Not dare. Necessity," he said. "You needed to see what courage looks like." The Cravon soldiers on the deck hesitated. They had never seen humans move with such certainty. Their weapons wavered, their confidence shaken. The human advantage. While Rourke faced the Cravon command, the fortress outside executed a series of clever maneuvers. Fighters darted in and out of enemy lines, creating false targets and trapping ships in gravity fields. Energy beams that should have destroyed turrets instead hit empty space as humans lured them into mistakes. Even the Cravon, with all their power, began to doubt. Their carefully organized formations were unraveling because of unpredictability, the human element they could not calculate. Inside the flagship, Rourke's team pressed forward. Each room they cleared increased the uncertainty among the Cravon soldiers. They realized too late that human courage was not just defiance. It was contagious. Rourke finally faced Vrax directly. "You may have conquered planets," he said calmly, "but courage cannot be conquered." Vrax's four eyes glowed with fury. "Then you will die, human." Rourke stepped forward, just like before, and the effect was immediate. Even on the command deck, Cravon soldiers hesitated. One by one, their weapons wavered. They had never faced someone who could make them doubt with a single step. The shockwave back at Fort Vega, the team outside coordinated a final strike. They launched a combination of torpedoes, gravity traps, and energy blasts aimed at the Cravon flagship. The ship shuddered under the assault. Inside, Rourke and his team disrupted the control panels, causing cascading failures across the flagship. The lights flickered, engines roared, and weapon systems shut down. Chaos reigned inside the alien ship, but the humans moved with precision, taking advantage of every distraction. Vrax roared in frustration, but his soldiers looked to him for guidance, and saw none. Their confidence had crumbled under the weight of human determination. Victory at a price. After hours of tense struggle, the Cravon flagship was crippled. Its weapons offline, shields failing, and engines damaged beyond repair. It drifted helplessly in space. The humans retreated back to Fort Vega, carrying their wounded and grateful for survival. The fortress itself had taken damage, but it was still standing. The human crew cheered. They had achieved the impossible. They had faced a superior enemy and survived. Rourke looked around at his people, exhausted but alive. "This is not the end," he said softly. "But today, we reminded the galaxy why humans do not bow." Mara approached him.
"Sir, we actually did it." "Yes," he said.
"And the best part? They know it." A new reputation across the galaxy, the story spread. Small human outposts, hidden colonies, and wandering survivors began to hear the tale of Fort Vega. They saw the courage of one human commander and the resilience of a battered crew. The Cravon, once supremely confident, now moved with caution. They no longer cheered. They no longer assumed victory. Humanity had shown them that courage could not be measured by numbers or weapons. And so, the stage was set for the final chapter of defiance, a story that would echo through generations. The stars around Fort Vega were quiet again. The smoke of battle had faded into drifting clouds of metal and fire. Wrecks of alien warships floated like shadows, their lights fading slowly into darkness. For the first time in years there was peace. Not victory, but peace. Inside the fortress, humans walked carefully through damaged corridors. Some laughed softly, others cried in relief. Every face was marked with exhaustion, but behind that weariness was something powerful. Pride. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the observation deck, looking out at the scattered remains of the Cravon fleet. The glass before him was cracked, and beyond it the stars shone brighter than ever. For so long humanity had only seen those stars as cold and distant, but tonight they felt warm. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle. No alarms, no explosions, just the faint hum of the ship's life support system and the slow rhythm of survival. The aftermath. The medics worked without rest. They carried the wounded to the infirmary, whispering words of comfort. Engineers patched up holes in the walls. Pilots sat beside their fighters, some still covered in soot and scratches, repairing them with bare hands. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. Mixed with the faint scent of victory, Lieutenant Grayson approached Rourke. "Sir, communication relays are back online," he reported. "We're picking up signals from other colonies. They heard about the battle." Rourke turned slowly. "What are they saying?" Grayson smiled faintly. "They're saying you did the impossible. They're saying, 'Humanity lives.'" For a long moment, Rourke said nothing. He looked out again at the stars, then nodded. "No," he said softly. "We live. All of us." He didn't take the credit. He knew the truth. It wasn't one man who saved humanity, but a spark of courage in every heart that refused to give up. The message across the stars within days. Signals spread across the galaxy. Small colonies hidden in asteroid belts and forgotten moons began responding. Some sent words of hope. Others offered aid. A few even pledged ships and weapons to rebuild the human defense network. They all spoke the same words. He stepped forward. That simple phrase became a symbol, not of one man, but of an entire species. The galaxy had thought humans were broken, scattered and afraid. But now they saw something else: unity, defiance, and courage that refused to die. Even some alien species who had once ignored humanity began to take notice. They had witnessed the fall of mighty empires, yet none had seen a race rise from ashes with such strength. Rumors spread that the Cravon were retreating, unsure of their next move. The sound of their cheering, once loud and cruel, was gone. The enemy that once roared now hid in silence. A moment of reflection, one evening. After long hours of repair and coordination, Rourke walked alone through the lower decks of the fortress. The halls were dimly lit, filled with the quiet hum of machinery. Every step echoed softly. He passed the memorial chamber, a simple room lined with names etched into metal plates. Each name represented a soldier, engineer, or civilian who had fallen during the war. Rourke stopped before one of the walls, tracing his fingers along the cold metal. Mara entered quietly behind him. "Sir, you should rest," she said gently. "I will," Rourke replied, his eyes still on the names. They never got to see this day. But because of them we did. Mara stood beside him. "They'd be proud," he smiled faintly. "They already are. I can feel it." They stood there together in silence, two survivors among many, staring at the legacy carved into steel. The Cravon's retreat far beyond Fort Vega. The remnants of the Cravon fleet regrouped around their home sector. Inside their command chambers the mood was grim. Overlord Vrax, once the symbol of Cravon power, sat alone in silence. His soldiers avoided his gaze. Reports came in. Their fleets were withdrawing, their colonies were nervous, and whispers spread through their people. The story of the human who stepped forward had reached even the Cravon worlds. Why do they not fear us anymore? asked one of his captains. They are still weak compared to us. Vrax looked out at the empty space before him. His voice was low and uncertain. Because weakness and fear are not the same, he said. They have lost much, yet they do not fear death. And that, Captain, makes them dangerous. For the first time in Cravon history, silence filled their great halls. There were no cheers, no songs of conquest, only unease. The promise of rebirth back on Fort Vega, the humans began planning for the future. Engineers started designing new ships. Scientists worked on rebuilding communication networks. Farmers began testing small hydroponic systems to grow food again. Everyone, no matter their role, had something to do. They were rebuilding not just a fortress, but a civilization. In the command room, a large holographic map displayed distant stars where human colonies once thrived. Some were gone forever, others barely surviving. Rourke looked at each one, his jaw tight with determination. We will go back, he said to his officers. One world at a time. No matter how far or broken, we will reclaim them. Humanity will rise again. The crew nodded, their faces glowing in the soft light of the hologram. The dream of a united Earthborn species was alive once more. The quiet between stars. That night, the fortress was unusually calm. The engines hummed softly, lights dimmed to a peaceful glow. Rourke sat alone in the observation room again. He held a small metal pendant, a simple token from his home on Earth, long destroyed in the first wave of war. He turned it in his hand and whispered to himself, "We're still here." The stars outside seemed to flicker in response. Maybe it was his imagination, or maybe the universe was listening. Either way, he smiled, a small, tired smile that carried hope. Mara entered quietly. "Sir, transmission coming through from one of the outer colonies. They request leadership." Rourke looked up. "Leadership?" "Yes," she said softly. "They say they want to join under one banner again, the banner of humanity." He nodded slowly, setting the pendant down. "Tell them, the banner still flies." A legend begins. In the following months, Fort Vega became more than a fortress. It became a symbol. Traders, refugees, and soldiers from all corners of the galaxy came seeking refuge and unity. Children born in the station grew up hearing stories of the one step forward, the moment when hope returned to the stars. They drew pictures of it, told stories in school, and carried that lesson in their hearts. That courage could change destiny. Across the galaxy, humans who had once hidden in fear now walked with pride again. They carried messages to one another. Stand tall, even when the universe says kneel. And in every corner where the Cravon name was once spoken with fear, people now whispered a different word. Human. The silence. After the cheering months passed, the fortress was repaired, its defenses stronger than ever. The Cravon did not return. Their fleet stayed distant, their voices gone from the void. Rourke stood on the command deck, surrounded by his officers. Grayson smiled beside him. "It's quiet out there," he said. Rourke nodded. "Too quiet. But that's fine. Let them stay silent." He looked once more toward the endless expanse of stars. The war had taken everything from him. His home, his family, his world. Yet in return, it had given him something even greater. Proof that the human spirit could never truly die. He turned to his crew, his voice firm and clear. "Remember this moment. The enemy cheered once, but now they are silent. Let that silence remind us who we are." The bridge crew stood straighter, pride shining in their eyes. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but they no longer felt small. For the first time in a long, dark age, humanity stood unbroken, and beyond Fort Vega, somewhere in the vastness of space, a faint echo lingered, not of fear, not of war, but of a single, unyielding step forward that changed everything.